I hope that you've gotten a lot out of the first two speakers and see that they build on one another, and I think our last presenters also have that characteristic of, well, where do we go from here, based on what we've heard. And our goal is to see a couple of practical outcomes that can be at our disposal when talking to your sons, our students, about navigating the complexities of life online, temptations online, and specifically for the next presenters, for times when they see things that are inappropriate, uncomfortable, or wrong, just wrong for our society and wrong for who our young men are as men forward with others in a Jesuit context. So it's my pleasure to introduce Megan Nevels and Annie Ortega. Annie is the Education Director and Megan is an Associate Director for the Anti-Defamation League. Annie and Megan oversee all regional educational training, including the very successful A World of Difference. A World of Difference Institute offers innovative programming to help schools develop comprehensive approaches to preventing and intervening against name-calling, bullying, cyberbullying as part of a broader strategy to create safe schools for all students. Megan Nevels and Annie Ortega.
Not sure everyone can see me behind here. We're just going to go ahead and stand behind here, and if you can't hear me, please raise your hand. So I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. I know that when we talk about these issues, and Megan and I spend all of our time facilitating dialogue around these issues with students and with teachers in particular, they can seem scary. And we sometimes refer to some of the data points that I'm going to share as the scaries, but I want to let you know that we're going to end on a positive note in terms of what are the things that you can use as conversation starters, the ways that you can engage in these dialogues, and ways to prepare yourself for engaging in dialogues about these topics. So our colleagues tonight, have talked a lot about our interactions online, through social media platforms, through texting, through gaming, and their impact on individuals, families, communities. So what else is happening in these social spaces, in addition to what we've heard so far? Well, I want to share a couple of data points with you before we talk about how you engage in these dialogues. And I will say that, as ADL is an anti-hate organization, so in doing this work, we are privy to a lot of conversations about hate. And so that's a little bit of what I'm going to focus on tonight. Not that we're going to spend all of our time on this areas, but there's a couple important data points that I wanted to share and highlight the work that not only A World of Difference Institute does on behalf of ADL, but our Center on Technology and Society and our Center on Extremism, who have put out various reports. I'll reference a couple of them here. So, in 2018, when Common Sense Media conducted a survey of social media use amongst teens, they asked young people about whether what happens online stays online. And I thought this was a really interesting statistic. 54% said that if parents knew exactly what happens on social media, they would be a lot more worried about it. So that to us says a lot, right? I think our previous speakers and our colleagues have shared a lot of that information already, and we can kind of figure out why that might be. So tonight we're going to focus a little bit about what hate looks like online, talk about how we get that conversation started. Not surprisingly, harassment is a common aspect in America's online lives and appears to be increasing. So 53% of American adults experience some type of online harassment. 41% are subjected to offensive name-calling. So this is the use of slurs. What we're finding is that most of the time when we're talking about slurs and offensive name-calling, we're looking at aspects of identity. I'm going to delve a little bit further into this as we move through our presentation. 33% had someone try to purposefully embarrass them. And we're talking about adults. The The data that we have is mostly focused on adults, but I think we can gather what our young people are exposed to if they're using these same platforms. 37% experienced severe harassment, which was up from 18% in 2017. So in 1 year, we saw a jump from 18% to 37% in terms of severe harassment. I want to define what severe harassment looks like. It's physical threats, sexual harassment, online stalking, doxing, which is sharing of public information or sharing information, private information publicly about a person, such as their name, location, where they work, where they live, things of this nature, and sustained harassment. So one of the other aspects that we really wanted to cover, because it's really where we find that a lot of Americans are living online, and that is in massively multiplayer online games. I had to say that to myself a couple times. Massively multiplayer online games, or what are commonly referred to as MMOs. So these are your Fortnite, your World of Warcraft. How many of you have sons in the room that engage in online games? It's a huge percentage. It is a billion, hundreds of billions of dollars a year industry. And a huge percentage of Americans are living in these communities. They've really formed communities. So by providing social spaces for social interaction and relationships outside of work, outside of school, outside of even your home, they have this capacity to function in sort of new third place for an informal sociability, much like the coffee house, other hangouts, pubs. So I want you to think of it in terms of that. And what we're seeing, especially when we look at surveys of adult users, 88% say that using these platforms, these MMOs, these massively multiplayer online games, they report positive social experiences while playing. And that's not something to take lightly. 88% of adults are saying they're experiencing positive social interactions. So that's making friends, that's helping other players, that's discovering new interests, that's feeling that they belong to a community. But we also have to look at that within the context of what their other experiences may be like in these communities. So 74% report experiencing harassment. 57 were targets of trolling, meaning players were the target of deliberate, malicious actions intended to cause harm. 65% report severe harassment. 29% of those have been doxxed, so had their private information shared publicly. 53%, this is where World Difference Institute really comes into play in terms of what we do and how we do our work and we engage folks in this work, in looking at bias and bullying. 53% of those believe they were targeted because of their race, ethnicity, religion, ability, gender, or sexual orientation. So things like, anecdotes like, for sounding black, for sounding like a woman, use of homophobic slurs, transphobic slurs. So earlier in meeting our fellow presenters, we were talking about what it means to be responsible for some of this type of behavior. Are we able to label someone, let's say homophobic, or sexist, or racist, or xenophobic, based on what we're seeing happening in these games? And I think it's a larger conversation than simply labeling. And that's really at the heart of what we do, is we engage people in these discussions so they understand our own personal cultural identity, what it is that we have sort of ingrained in terms of our belief systems, our values, how we understand our place in society, what words we think belong to us and we can use regularly, what words we understand we should not be using. And as you look at language, and you're talking a little bit earlier with some of you folks in the room, language has changed. Our understanding of how language is used and what terms can be used and by who has changed immensely. How many of you realize that a lot of the movies, TV shows that you watched when you were your son's age would feel really inappropriate to share with them now? A lot of the comedy, right? A lot of the memes. We had this discussion a little bit earlier. So times have changed, our understanding of who we are in the world and how folks walk through the world and interact with the world around them has changed as well. So a couple more data points I wanted to share before I really delve into what is at the root of harassment that we see in these online spaces. So when we looked further at players' exposure to, let's say, controversial topics, things like extremism and disinformation, found this to be really interesting as well. 23% were invited to discuss or expose discussions about white supremacist ideology, such as the superiority of whites and the inferiority of non-whites, white identity, a home for the white race. So this is an alarmingly large percentage of folks that are using these platforms when you consider how widespread use is, that are being invited into discussions of this nature. 13% were exposed to disinformation about the 9/11 attacks. 9% were exposed to discussions about Holocaust denial. So we cannot say exactly to what extent people were exposed, to these conversations and discussions, nor in what context, related to whether it was, for the purpose of radicalization or recruitment. But we know that these discussions and these conversations are happening. So what we also saw, and I'm going to relate all of this together, 46% of players engage in some form of harassment online in multiplayer games. 96% of those who identified themselves as harassers have experienced harassment themselves. So this is a cycle, right? So what is at the root? And essentially, what's at the root is a normalization of hate. So I didn't spend a lot of time going over each and every single one of these, but these are additional reports where a lot of this data comes from. You're free to look at. They're listed on our website, and I'm happy to field any phone calls, emails, in terms of where a lot of this data came from. It's really interesting to actually break down further. But a tool that ADL uses is what we call a pyramid of hate. And I'm clicking through all of these slides. What you see at the end is we form a pyramid. In our work at ADL, and focused on education in particular when it comes to students and educators, what we target and what we address is what we consider to be the root of hate, the base layers on which hateful action starts. So we look at the escalation. So our work focuses mainly on biased attitudes, looking at where bias comes from, how bias is normalized. So these are things like stereotyping, a fear of different, justifying biases, seeking out like-minded people. How many of us do that? We seek out like-minded folks, don't we? We do. I do it too. Seeking out information to confirm one's existing beliefs. This can include microaggressions. This can include, jokes. This can include a number of different manifestations of bias. So biased attitudes don't necessarily live out in the world until we say them out loud, right? So we start with what's internal. We all have bias. One of the basic premises of our institute is that bias is universal. Bias is sort of a naturally occurring phenomenon. Each one of us has a bias towards something. I like to use this example. I would say that I have a bias for blue and gold, and maybe perhaps a bias against cardinal and gold. So that's my personal bias, right? Based on my experience, based on who I am, based on where I've lived, based on where I've gone to school. So bias is this air that we're sort of breathing in, and our children are breathing in that same air as well. Now, the air might be different today than it was when we were their age. So all of that has to come into consideration when we look inward at what bias we have, what biased attitudes we have. I like to use this example as well. As a Californian, I believe that California is great. I believe that California is wonderful. So in my way of thinking, this is a great state to be from and live in. It's just an attitude at this point. Let's say I go to a conference outside of Los Angeles, outside of California, and I meet a big group of folks, colleagues engaging in the same work, and they say, "We're from Texas." And I take this attitude of mine, and I haven't acted on it, I haven't said anything, but I instantly think, oh, I'm not from California. I'm talking about my biased attitude, right? It comes from somewhere. We're not saying that it's bad, but I definitely need to keep that bias in check in my interactions with folks, if I truly believe in having respectful dialogue, right? So what's the next step up in this escalation? That's acts of bias. That's moving from biased attitudes to actions that are motivated from that biased attitude. So this is also where ADL education programmings live, focusing on acts of bias. A lot of what we do is invest our time in working with students to become allies in this fight against hate and bias. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the rest of the pyramid. You can also go on our website and take a look at it. But the escalation continues to systemic discrimination. So these are systems. Another conversation we had a little bit earlier, we were talking about whether bias or acts of hate or racism or sexism, heterosexism, any one of the isms are individual acts. And if we undertake those individual acts, are we racist? Are we homophobic? Are we sexist? But we have to look at the larger systems in place in which we see these isms manifested as well. And I think this is in large part where we find ourselves as young people. We are living in an environment where these behaviors may be normalized, where this language is normalized. When we look back at the data, looking at what people's online experience is, it begs the question. When we look at these two, key data points and pose a question, 88% of adults who play online multiplayer games report positive social experiences, right? We clarified that. 74% experiencing harassment. So how do you stand up against hate and harassment within a platform, within a community that gives you so much? And this is where we're challenged. This is where adults are challenged. This is where young people are challenged. So I'm going to continue going through just so we have a full picture of our tool here in terms of the pyramid of hate. We have bias-motivated violence and genocide at the very top. Now, in no way are we saying that all of these things follow this sequence always. What we're really pointing out is that if you turn it over on its side, it's a slippery slope. So each level creates sort of a normalization and I'm not going to say an expectation, but it sort of creates a standard that we live by as individuals, as communities. And so it's important to recognize this and have this knowledge of the relationship between bias attitudes, acts of bias, systemic discrimination as we move forward into having these discussions with one another, with our children, with our coworkers. If I can share a little bit of personal, experience, it's necessary to have these conversations with our family members as well. I can't say that there isn't bias and biased language used in my own family. And so these are discussions that we all need practice in managing. So it's important to recognize as we look at, this escalation and sort of our online experiences. The internet has become a new frontier for many things, including a new frontier for hate. We essentially have learning communities online, and I say this to parents time and time again. The internet is a wonderful, incredible, powerful tool in still very human hands. And as some of our other speakers mentioned, when we talk about our young people, we're talking about in very young hands, right? Who don't necessarily have the experience, or haven't really thought all of this through. You're sitting here in this room, you have all this knowledge. Now it's about how we translate that to our young people as well. When we talk about things like what we're seeing in media, when we talk about incident response, and that's something that ADL does quite a bit. How many of you have read or seen news stories happening here in Los Angeles, in LA County, relating to posts that go viral that included, something that a student said or did, a little bit like what Ben was talking about, but then impact entire communities of folks, impact schools. Those conversations make their way into the classroom, whether they happened on the school campus, outside the school campus, in the community, even in other places. And so ADL works really hard to address, these issues. What we're seeing is, a weaponization sometimes of humor, sarcasm, humor to promote and normalize hate. And so these are also the things that are happening online that we want to be aware of. More than half of adults, 59%, believe that online hate and harassment are making hate crimes more common. Whether that's true or not, we can't say, but this is what data indicates. These are the attitudes that we are seeing. 22% feel less safe in their community as a result of online hate. So these are real attitudes, real beliefs. So now that we have this information, how do we engage in these dialogues? So I want to invite my colleague Megan to come up and talk a little bit more about what that conversation looks like as we engage in it with our young people.
I'd like to acknowledge that it is freezing in here, so if you want to shake your hands, we can do a little shake out of the theater kids so we can do a whole thing. So thank you for staying with us. We appreciate your attention. You are all such wonderful listeners. So as Annie pointed out, and as we heard from our speakers earlier, bias and hate-related incidents go viral every single day. And young people are likely seeing and interacting with hateful language each time they log onto social media and gaming platforms. So what do we do as adults to interrupt problematic trends that are affecting our young people? Well, establishing open lines of communication with youth about issues of hate and bias is key. Now, I know how challenging it can be to have a dialogue with teenagers. Sometimes getting more than a one-word answer is a win for the day. So I'm going to share a few levels of questioning that can be used to start to talk about hateful and biased language with your teenagers. Oh, Annie didn't mention this, but this is an example of an incident that ADL was brought in to deal with. These are the kind of things we're seeing online. So incidents, like the one I just showed you, can be really good opportunities to begin a dialogue with your child. Young people are aware of so much more than we assume, and they are paying attention to everything they read and hear online, as well as what they do or do not hear from us as the adults in their lives. As you very well know, when we try and tell a teenager what to think about something, they shut us out. But if we offer space to dialogue about an issue, provide any helpful knowledge or perspective, and allow them to pause, think, self-reflect, and then come to their own conclusions, they are more likely to let us in on their thoughts and feelings. So here are a few questions that we came up with at ADL that can be used when something has happened or gone viral. Simple. What are your thoughts about why this happened? What feelings have come up for you in response to this incident? And we are living in a time of incredible examples of youth-led movements and activism. So asking a question like, what are some things we can do to make a difference in our community, society, and world, helps tap into that wealth of experience that can help a young person feel empowered to be proactive and create change. Now, the more we open up lines of communication with our kids, the deeper we can go into subsequent conversations. So as Annie spoke about earlier, at the root of so many issues and incidents affecting our lives today is bias and an inability to take other people's perspectives into consideration. People are experiencing and or using slurs and biased language in their daily life, and the response when that language is challenged is often, what does it matter, it doesn't impact me, these words don't hurt anyone anymore. We hear that all the time. As language changes, and as we get further and further away from the origins and violent histories of certain painful words, it is imperative that we are all on the same page about what words can and cannot be used. We'd like to think that these things are affecting other people's kids and not our own, but studies show that this is highly unlikely. Whether it's on Instagram, or Snapchat, or Reddit, or 4chan, or gaming platforms, hateful language has become normalized, and it is passing by young people's eyes and ears constantly, but the understanding of impact has diminished. The words we use point to our values. How we talk about women illustrates how we do or do not value women. How we talk about diversity and inclusion tells everyone around us if and how we value people's identities. It is important for young people to understand the power of the words they use and how those words can impact others. But not only that, they need to understand the unintended consequences to young people who misuse derogatory words, share offensive memes, or simply laugh along when slurs are used, as evidenced by our previous speakers. When approaching these potentially challenging conversations with our young people, we must first feel prepared to discuss. So really to know what you think about these things, have answers ready for them. It is important to model as a family how to lean into discomfort and have scary conversations that can help us to disrupt hate and bias. As I said, before you ask questions, know how you would answer them, as your kids will likely ask you questions as well. So as a family, discuss the use of slurs that you have seen, heard, or used yourselves, and talk about what you're going to do to confront slurs and biased language in yourselves and others in the future. We can practice speaking up when we hear stereotypes from our children or from our peers by responding with questions like, "What did you mean by that? That sounded to me like a stereotype. Do you understand how hurtful that was?" We can help our kids critically analyze the information they're coming across. When your child shares information with you that doesn't quite seem true, which they're coming across wrong information all the time, you can ask questions like, "Where did you learn that? Who put out that information? Why do you think they want you to believe that? Does that information line up with what you've seen or experienced?" And to have a dialogue with our young people about slurs and biased language, you can use these questions to dig a little bit deeper. How do you feel when you hear a slur or biased language? Do you hear and see slurs and other biased language as you go about your day? What happens in school when slurs are used? How do you and others respond when you hear slurs? How do you wish you could respond? And why do you think people use slurs? Now, all of these questions that I shared are guideposts. So whatever feels most organic or natural to you in the moment is the one that will yield the most success, right? And I always say that we don't know how to talk about something until we actually try to talk about it. We don't know what words sound like until they start to come out of our mouths. So it will be messy. We stumble. As I like to say, I was raised, and I assume a lot of people here were raised, that we just didn't talk about these things. I learned that civil rights meant racism was over. Very wrong. Not true at all. And I never learned how to talk about those things. So as an adult, I had to figure it out, and I stumbled, and I made mistakes. Now I'm in diversity and inclusion work, so, we all find our path. But it's up to all of us to move the needle towards equity and fair treatment in a time when hate crimes and hate incidents are on the rise. Young people are being constantly bombarded with contradicting information, much of it untrue and problematic. And we have the power to offer new ways of thinking and seeing the world and encourage our kids to join the fight against hate and be allies to each other. So we are here as ADL as a resource to you in your child's school, be it Loyola, and Jamal will talk about that after me. Or if your student goes to another school and you think, I think anti-bias training would be really great for this school. I'm noticing things happening. There's stories coming up. Kids are getting in trouble for certain things. Reach out to us. We love being connected to new schools. And our website is full of resources for families and educators in response to current events. I'm not kidding when I say that if there's a shooting or something horrible happens, within 24 hours, we have resources for families, we have lesson plans for teachers on how to address these things, and we give you the questions to ask. So you don't have to do the hard work, you get the thing, you dig in, and you start to have these conversations. So please reach out to us if we can be of any help to you. And I know that tonight was just full of so much scary information. It's horrifying. But we can make a difference, and you have the capacity and the ability and the connection with your kids to start to make a change and help us move into a better world. Thank you.